Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I am Dr. Cindy Banyai, candidate for Congress in Southwest Florida's Congressional District 19. I'm a mom and small business owner, and I care about our water, our health, and our community. And today we are hosting our virtual town hall meeting focusing on our economy. Thank you so much for being here today. My staff, Eddie, my campaign coordinator, is here to help facilitate. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the question box. Any point in time, we will be willing to answer those questions for you. You will also undoubtedly see at least one of my children pop in here at some point in time. I am a single mother of 3, which means that I am now full-time support for a toddler and virtual IT and schooling support for my 2 older children as well. But they should be good for a little while, but my littlest Evie usually, pops in from time to time, so you will absolutely see her. So you see my information up here. I do like to stay connected with people, so please feel free to email me at vote@cindybanyai.com. You can call me or text me at 239-351-5574. My website, of course, you can check out a little bit more information about me, cindybanyai.com. And so here we are today. Thanks so much for being here. I'm going to just go ahead and focus on me now instead of just my slides. But we are coming to you virtual in the age of Corona. And here comes Evie. Baby, I already saw your tower. I have to talk to my friends now.
Well, I saw it again.
Okay, I'll come look at it afterwards. Okay? Keep building. She makes amazing towers. What can I say?
The boats are all gone.
Oh, okay. I'll have to come see it after. So today, what I'd like us to focus on, so each week we've been doing these virtual town halls to talk specifically about issues, and sometimes we have special guests. And sometimes you just get to listen to me and we get to ask questions. And I guess the good thing for all of us is that I am not somebody who usually just likes to guess about things. I like to share valuable and important information around what's going on in our world. So the economy, now that we've kind of gotten ourselves into this state of understanding around the coronavirus, there's a state of emergency across the United States. All 50 states have their emergency orders themselves. We are still having various levels of social distancing and various suppression policies like that. However, one thing has become abundantly clear that we have a major economic issue, not only within the United States, but around the world related to this virus. And we do have a very connected and global economy. So this is not just the United States in a vacuum, but it's every major country around the world, and even smaller countries are being affected as well, and across the global system. So this is something that I talk a lot about in the class that I teach at Florida Gulf Coast University in global studies. I have been working with those students now for the past 6 years to help gain an understanding of how global systems work, and that nothing happens individually. It's all this, you push something and something else comes out kind of scenario. And we have to, in order to address these big global issues, we have to think about how we can work together. This is not just one country in a vacuum. It's not one business in a vacuum. It's everybody everywhere. And up and down the system, I will say too. So there's roles that local and state governments are going to need to play to support individuals and to bring about economic recovery. There's going to be roles that the national governments are going to need to play to help their own financial system and their own economic system, as well as to support people through recovery. Then there's going to be a necessity for global collaboration around aspects of our economy, particularly if you think about trade, particularly if you think about health, because those 2 things in particular have a lot of interplay, as we can see now very clearly. And we'll talk about some decisions recently that have been dismaying to me in regards to that. But let's focus a little bit on the economy. So we know within the United States that we have, at least thus far, that have filed within our unemployment systems across the country, roughly 17 million people have filed for unemployment in the past 3 weeks. And this was, and I haven't seen the most recent set of numbers, so we'll be watching for when those come out. But the thing that's really shocking about this is how massive of a scale that was, and what this really means for individuals and families and local economies overall. Clearly, for individual families, this is devastating, right? And in the state of Florida, we have the double issue that our unemployment system is completely messed up. Like, there is no way to sugarcoat that. And they tried, the governor, the Ron DeSantis administration tried to say, oh, well, this was really Rick Scott had made this website, and it's just, he did a bad job. There was a lot of people talking about how the website that was originally designed by Rick Scott after the 2009 recession was specifically designed to make sure that unemployment numbers were low by making the system so incredibly complicated. Now, I don't know how you feel about hearing things like that, but I get really angry because I don't understand why we would be paying. And by the way, the website was like $72 million out of Florida taxpayer money to build a website to prevent people from using it for what it was built for. So that's very dismaying, and I know that right now there's been, through NBC2 and Dave Elias's work on his investigative reporting around the unemployment system in the state of Florida, they keep uncovering more and more problems with this unemployment system in the state of Florida. So this is a big problem. So people are not getting their money, people were getting denied, and it's my understanding that they scrapped the old website, built another website to the tune of like $102 million. And people are still not getting what they need. People who qualified under provisions in the CARES Act, which is the stimulus package that was passed by the Congress, were not getting what they needed. They were being rejected, essentially. So, and the people who actually got through the system, because the initial problem was the capacity of the system and the fact that it was designed to be really cumbersome, trying to get attrition from that, because making it too difficult for people to actually complete, and then not having enough avenues to get in. So even the people who got in were being denied because of the various components that were not programmed into the system from the CARES Act. Now there's some speculation that people are going to be receiving paper checks instead of direct deposits. There are avenues for people to file unemployment through paper instead of online. It's just, there were places outside of Miami where people were lining up to get those paper applications. So this is awful. It's an awful situation. It's complete mismanagement by the governor and his administration in the state of Florida. It's a shameful, shameful example of disinvestment in the public good. And this is going to be a theme of mine moving forward, because I have been an advocate of the public good for my entire career. It's always been about what is the best for people. Not right now, baby. Gotta let me finish. It's always what's best for people. Afterwards. I'll help you after, okay? Go ahead and watch Mickey.
Mom, I want to stay outside.
She wants me to take this outside. I can't take it outside yet, baby. All right. So I've been a longtime advocate of the public good. It's what the vast majority of my research and my publications have been on, and feel free to look me up so you can see exactly what I've been talking about. I've written books on this. I've advised governments around the world on how to design policy with the public good in mind, and then how do we measure it and how do we implement it. And this has been a big problem for me, because you never design interventions, right? You never design programs and supports with the best case scenario in mind, right? Like, you're supposed to be designing for like the worst case scenario, right? And that's what we're looking at right now. We should have been thinking, like, what happens if we have a significant problem and a lot of people need to access the system? What do we have in place for that? And we really haven't done it. In fact, we've been doing just the bare minimum. And this, I will say, without hurt in my heart, but this is the problem with fiscal conservative thinking. If you were only investing public dollars for the most meager of public means, you are doing a disservice to your job. Because your job as a public servant, whether you're a county commissioner or a state rep or a congressional candidate or the president, your job is to serve the public good. Your job is to steward taxpayer dollars to help the people in our country to the best of your ability and within your jurisdiction. Okay, and that's it. All this other stuff that people talk about is other stuff. Okay, personal things, vanity, that's what that is. But every single time that we have somebody coming up and not doing right by our tax dollars, then we have elected the wrong person. So we have to think significantly about how we do that. And I think our economic situation is also one that we have to think significantly about. Now, I have been somebody who has had a long time interest in universal basic income and direct cash payments. And frankly, I will be completely honest with you, this is from my evaluator perspective. I love designing programs and interventions. I've done it extensively throughout my career with nonprofits and government agencies around the world. However, when it comes to efficiency and effectiveness, the most demonstrable evidence in terms of efficiency, as well as more often than not in terms of the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, are direct cash payments. And the simple fact is, the more regulations that we put in, the more means testing we put in for support for people, the costlier it becomes. Because every time you put in a stipulation to somebody that says, hey, you can get this money, but you have to do A, B, and C, or you have to be X, Y, and Z type of person. Every time you put one of those qualifications in, somebody has to check it. It's for paper. Here.
Oh, it's for paper.
Yeah, go ahead, put it on the paper.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have to means test that. So that means you have to pay somebody to sit there and verify, and probably more than one somebody, like lots of somebodies that understands the ABC, qualifications and the XYZ components that people have to qualify for. You think of it like this. The states that tried, despite its unconstitutionality, to institute things like drug testing for welfare recipients. Not only is that an incredible invasion of somebody's personal rights, it's the contrary to the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. But on top of that, it's incredibly expensive. And then you're putting that cost back onto the individual to prove that they are not a drug addict before you give them roughly the same amount of money for food. It's stupid. And it was clearly designed to be a barrier to keep people out. And that's a problem. So the truth of the matter is, and as much as there's a lot of people who want to sit there and say, oh, well, we should really have, we should know the type of person, that feeling in the heart of people who say, oh, we can only give it to this kind of people. We got to make sure that they're the right kind of person. That is control. And that is lack of trust that those people are talking about, right? That's what they say. And it's also, this is where things like racism rear their ugly head. There's this distrust between different groups of people, and they say, I really want to help poor people, but like just only certain kinds of poor people, right? And as soon as you start saying that, that is what that feeling is. And so you try to legitimize it through means testing, and it becomes much more incredibly expensive system than it needs to be. So some of the best things that have come out of the CARES Act, in my opinion, include the fact that there is no means testing, essentially, like for the stimulus package. It's here you are, here's the money coming to people to help them. There's no qualifications, there's no application. This is what's going on. Now, of course, there's practicalities around it, including things like how you get that. So they're using the IRS system. I understand it. It's not a perfect system, but frankly, given the time period, it's a good way to do it. These children, I'll tell you what, working from home, venture every day. I'm going to need you to go out and be quiet, okay? He was singing to her. So it's not a perfect system. Now, I'll tell you what's a complete horrific component of that story is now that the IRS is going to delay payments to people because Donald Trump wants to put his name on the check. Now, I have seen a lot of corrupt governments around the world, and this is exactly what they do. Right? They want you to know specifically that it was them. So they slap their name on it, they slap their face, they slap their logo, so that when you do hand people out, and this is populism 101 too, by the way, guys. This is what everybody, this is what Chavez did. This is what, every person with dictatorial aspirations in their country did. They get people in line and they get people on the hook by literally handing them out something, and they say, look, it came from me, and you build patronage networks off of it. And it's not a way that democratic governments are supposed to function, and so that's awful. But let's talk a little bit about what's going on and how we can move forward too. So we had been hearing now, so we know that the situation in the United States is incredibly fraught when it comes to individual families and unemployment, right? So not only do we need to continue to streamline that system, but we also need to continue the extension of the payments so that the states have the capacity that they need to process these unemployment plates. We need a level of accountability, by the way, that the states are actually doing what the CARES Act and Congress has asked them to do. Now, I know that, again, we're all running from the fire here to a certain extent, but I really think that it's the responsibility of Congress to hold Governor DeSantis accountable for not enacting what he was supposed to enact under his watch. So if components that Congress has added into the support of the unemployment system were not enacted, that's his fault, and he needs to be held accountable for that. And that's absolutely something that congressional oversight should be responsible for. So we need to think about that moving forward, how we're going to have this compliance with the state administrations, with essentially federal dollar supports, okay? We need to continue those payments. I think that we're going to need to continue the basic income payments for, I would say probably it would be my preference to continue it for ever. I think that we're looking at absolutely economic contraction. The reports out from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, had to be readjusted from a 3.3% global economic growth to a contraction of 3% for the year. So that's a 6.3% swing, right? From growing to contraction. And there was another, is it Florida's state economic, I don't have it right in front of me, but we're seeing contractions, economic decreases, all up and down the board. It was retail sales. That's what I saw, that there was an 8.7% decrease in it. Now, again, and as I tell my students all the time, we're actually really terrible at understanding and contextualizing numbers. Like, at least with 8.7%, like, we can kind of get it. But I think that people are thinking like that's not that big of a number, right? Same thing when you say like 3.3 million. Like, because the number is 3.3 and it's like falls into like how many fingers we have, we forget that there's like a million component on it, right? But these small percentage point changes, when you're talking about the massive size of the global economy, or even the massive size of the American economy, is a significant swing, right? So we need to be cognizant of that. We're going to need to be cognizant of the continued unemployment that results from it. So there are people like me, for instance, my personal situation, I'm part-time faculty at Florida Gulf Coast University. That puts me, I'm the first one on the chopping block. So let's say that the university doesn't get as many student enrollments and things like that. They're going to take my classes. They're going to fire me. I have no protections, by the way, too. They don't even have to tell me, there's no like 30 days or anything. They're just like, hey, by the way, cancel your class. Sorry about that. Hope you didn't need that money. And then just give it to a tenured faculty because their classes had been canceled, right? And this has happened to me before, not because of this kind of influx thing, but because there was a faculty who needed a class because nobody took their class, and they literally just gave my class, who was full, to him. So, and yeah, and that happens. So I may lose my job, not today because everything's okay, but maybe in 4 months from now, possibly. Same thing with my private sector client. We do online training. Seems like a really safe area. So right now we have things going, but will this continue? We don't know in 3 or 4 months. So I may be like part of that delayed lag of people that lose their jobs. And I'm sure that there are lots of other people too, as we see continued shifts in the economy. So we're going to need not only the continued unemployment supports, but continued supports for people who are essentially in the gig economy like me. Like I'm not going to get, with my private sector clients, because I'm run through my own personal company, I don't have any unemployment through them. So what happens to me? So this is also where the concept of universal basic income can be really helpful for people. Now, we could see how when the economy stabilizes, we may be able to revisit what that looks like. But, if we're giving the same amount of money to banks, to only, for instance, to support small businesses, only to have them within 3 days run out of money for it, right? We can certainly think about how the effectiveness and cost of direct cash transfers to individuals will help people who are suffering most, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if some of the big companies, if they do fall apart and we have a universal basic income, people are still going to be able to get by, right? And companies can restructure more often than not. Almost every major company that we know of has had that in their history. There are options for them. There's funding available for big companies. Individual people who fall into debt and lose their houses have far fewer options for support. And let's not forget the fact that the other area that we've completely disinvested in terms of public good is affordable housing and homeless services. Okay, so like if people start losing their houses, there's nowhere for them to go, particularly in Southwest Florida, whom before the crisis hit, all of the beds were already filled, okay, in terms of homeless services. So this is a multifaceted issue. So we really need to overall continue to think about how we're going to support individual families. And I think at least in the short term, continuing those basic payments is going to be necessary, and thinking about how we may continue it in the future. I have some other things I want to talk about in terms of the global economy and essentially how I would be looking forward and acting as a congressional representative, but I want to make sure that you who are in the audience here have the opportunity to share. So please feel free, questions, comments, put them in the box. I'm happy to respond to them. Otherwise, I'm also happy to keep going because I have a lot of thoughts on this. Economics too. Oh, thank you. My daughter's just come in with stickers on her face, which is by far the cleanest thing that she's done during one of my virtual sessions. So economics overall has been something that I have lamented the people's lack of desire to understand about. It's not fun, like more often than not. Trade, not fun to talk about. It's detailed, it's minutia, but it's the fabric of what keeps things going. Same thing with economics, right? Understanding actually how economics works is a field that a lot of people aren't even going to. So much so that at Florida Gulf Coast University, that major was on the chopping block a couple of years ago because so few people were actually taking it on as a major. And for me, my analysis of that at the time was that there's been such a push on students to have an understanding of like what your job is, right? That when people say, hey, I'm going to study economics, and they're like, well, where are you going to work afterwards? It's not so clear for folks, right? But it's an incredibly important thing to understand how when you do push and the way that these fiscal and monetary tools that we have to support our global economy and our national economy work, that I wish that more people were going into it, and I wish that there was a bigger value on it, because now more than ever we need it. We need it so much. I dabble in it. I would say I have a specialization for my undergraduate in economics, but I'm not by far an expert in it. I'm an expert in like local economic development. I've done a ton of work on research development. I worked with Hendry County here in Southwest Florida to devise their community economic development plan in a very participatory way. But that kind of stuff I'm very well versed in. And, I have a pretty good understanding of how our macroeconomic stuff works and our global stuff. But I think that we need more people in it and talking about it and understanding it. And so hopefully some of the information here that I share today will help people have trust in me, that I have some interest and knowledge in this area, and that I can be a good steward of our economy. And it's not literally just I'm up here talking about, like the Republicans in particular loves getting up and talking about like, we're going to create jobs or okay, great, jobs are great. Okay, like here we are again looking at what kinds of jobs and what is the value of diversifying our economy, and what is the value of having things like a living wage for folks, right? So right now, what we're finding out about all of that as well is that the people who we've been fighting and telling that they're worthless in our economy are some of the most essential people, right? People who are at food service, people who are stocking the shelves at grocery stores, the people who day in and day out have to fight just to get minimum wage or a step above minimum wage, right? These are some of the people who are still out there working, and many of them are working without employment protections. Many of them are working out with personal and health protections as well. And that's dismaying. The other thing that I think about in terms of economy and local economy here in Southwest Florida is how there's a couple factors in it that really dismay me. So one is our complete reliance on the tourism industry and it being like the paramount thing for us, right? We pay most attention to it. Our local government, our state government pays so much attention to the tourism industry and the building of high rises and luxury condos that they can sell and rent out, and big hotel developments on the beach and all of the other stuff that goes into the tourism industry. Now, we are on beaches. We are a beautiful place to go. We should absolutely have a tourism industry. So let me be clear about that. However, we shouldn't be putting all of our eggs into that one basket. By the way, the vast majority of those organizations are small businesses, right? With the exception of the handful of very large resorts like South Seas and the new Margaritaville that's kind of coming up on Fort Myers Beach. Aside from those big resorts, right? Almost all of the other organizations that are working in our tourism industry are small businesses. And I'll tell you that because if you look at the largest employers in Southwest Florida, they are the hospitals, the schools, and the local government. Falls off pretty precipitously after that. Okay, not in a small, not a small way, right? It goes, those are the big guys, right? The education, and by the way, two of them are completely public, and Lee Health in particular is a state-run, state overseen nonprofit. So our biggest employers are government-related agencies, and or the non-government, but we have an oversight in the state around it. You got to come to terms with that too, in terms of what actually is happening in our economy, right? So we rely on the government for the functioning of our economy a heck of a lot more than a lot of people want to say that we do. And then we run 91% of the businesses in total in Southwest Florida are small businesses. And so these are the guys that are going to get the pinch. And they have been getting the pinch. And I'm sure if any of you have been out and about at all, you have seen these small businesses closing. You've seen them as soon as they knew that they were going to lose even a small percentage, because the margins and things like food service are so small, they closed down. And some of them had to innovate, and they're doing a great job. Like my friends at Millennial Brewery, on a dime turned from, having their brewery and having an event space to doing beer delivery. They lobbied the state to get that rule change, by the way, and I'm so super proud of their work to do that and their tenacity to do that. And now they're canning and distributing. So folks like them that have the innovation and the drive are going to make it, but even their situation, is precarious. And folks like them are relying on things like food benefits and SNAP. And so we have to think about what that means for people in our community, and when businesses like that can't make it, and when we have essentially false promises of business supports for small businesses that literally, if you did not apply for it on the first day, you don't even have a chance of getting it, and most of that money is out, and if the systems could even have gotten you into the first place. So you know, it's a terrible situation. I know it's a crisis situation, but there's a lot that leaves me to be desired. And the thing that I keep going back in is that we need to be investing in these systems the whole time, because when we are in a crisis and we need them, we want them to work. That's true. Not everybody's going to need the unemployment system every single day, but when you need it, you want it to work. Not everybody's going to need to go to the hospital every single day. Not everybody's going to need to go to the ICU every single day. Not every day we're going to have a pandemic, but when we do, we want to be prepared, right? And I just think that for those of you, especially in the small business realm, the barriers to getting help in the small business realm have been high forever. My experience trying to start my small business, you had to have 2 years of profitability on the books before they would even give you a loan. Like, there's no such thing as a startup loan for small businesses unless you already have capitalization. So, you know, I think that we need to think about this and do better and make better investments, federal investments in partnership with state entities to support our small businesses. So Eddie, do we have any questions coming in?
No, not yet. Sorry.
That's okay, Eddie. That green button is the microphone.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to tap the button on my phone. It doesn't like tapping for me. Like, it doesn't like turning on and off.
Technology gets us every time. So
yeah, my screen
right.
likes going blank.
So that's our
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So technology can be our friend, and I'm so glad that we're here today. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please do feel free to put them into the question box. For those of you that are watching this at a later date, please feel free to email me or send a message to me via Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and I will be happy to work with you to respond to that, or if you have any additional ideas. I do want to say also that we have been updating our COVID-19 resource page on our Facebook page, so you can get to it. There's a link in a light box on the front page if you're getting to it from a browser, and there's going to be access on the home page if you don't have that light box to be able to link to that page directly. Otherwise, it's under the contact us page. Is that right, Eddie? I can't remember if it's contact or connect.
It's under connect.
It's under connect. Thank you. So you have those resources that have some of the basic healthcare information, but also some of these supports that people around the community may need, filing the unemployment, and getting supports. And I always talk about, you know, my background is working primarily with nonprofit agencies that nonprofits, you know, they're in their own world of hurt right now. They're going to need supports moving forward. But individual families, especially if you know people who are not able to access the unemployment system, or they're having trouble with it, or if they are they got denied, or you know they're not going to get that stimulus payment with Trump's name on it until the beginning of May, which is basically what they're saying at this point in time. Please let them know that they should contact the United Way through 211. The 211 online is the triage point for all the major service agencies around Southwest Florida. It's everywhere, but it's localized to us here. Our United Way serves both Collier and Lee and Hendry and Okeechobee, I believe. But our 211 will tell you what you need to know, who you can contact, and it's everything. So you need rental assistance, you need food assistance, you need medical assistance, you know, utility assistance, there's stuff like that. And I wanted to let you know that there is funding available for those things. If you are in the means, you have the means to donate, I suggest that you go to the Southwest Florida Community Foundation to contribute to the Southwest Florida Strong Fund, I believe is what it's called. And that is actually goes to the United Way and to partner agencies to provide things like those housing supports and utility supports and to get people through day by day. But please, please, please check there. Tell your friends and neighbors to check 211 before they start freaking out too much, because chances are there's some agency in our system here in Southwest Florida that's ready to help or can help or try to help get you there. Because us in the nonprofit world, we're pretty used to running on meager names, and we are used to putting out fires, so to speak, and helping people and spinning up things when we need to. Not perfect by any means, but we absolutely, understand that our role is to be a resource in the community and do the best to do that. So check out 211 if you need it. But let's just shift gears briefly here to talk about what this means in terms of our global economy as well, right? So we have, right now, Trump is participating in the G20 summit, which is the group of 20, which are the top 20 economies of the world. I better believe that talking about the coronavirus and the outcome of the coronavirus is going to be a hot topic of conversation for these major economies around the world. We had yesterday Trump engaging in a blame game with the WHO and then pulling the United States funding from that. So this has been longtime lament of me with the Trump administration. There is this, anti-globalist sentiment among a lot of conservative folks. For me, it seems very misplaced. I think it's put into this wrong category of understanding around things. It's whipped up in some conspiracy theories, tinged with sovereignty issues. But I'm very disappointed that not only is this a clear scapegoating by the Trump administration of international organizations, but that we are continually disinvesting in these essentially global collaboration portals and repositories of knowledge, because we don't know what we don't know in other places. And that's what organizations like the World Health Organization help us to do. They help us to collect information. So scientists in one country developing a test for coronavirus and a vaccine for coronavirus, or are learning about the vectors of disease transmission, there's a way for that to go up to the international level and be shared between countries, because there is a way for us to understand it and share it, okay? The World Health Organization doesn't manage pandemics, okay? Let me make that clear. Countries, governments manage pandemics, okay? The World Health Organization is an international collaborative body that supports the work of governments to handle things like pandemics. So let's just be clear on what they do and do not do, okay? They do not make policy. They do not tell governments what to do, but they provide them with the best possible information available on something. They guide the policy. They put out, potential policy doctrine and guidelines and say, this is what you should do if you want to prevent this. This is the information that we have on these things. Now, much like all of science, there's some time of lag, and with emergent things like this, what you know today, because there hasn't been a full randomized control trial, may not be the same thing that you know and do the next day, because it's changing, and we have to be adaptable at this point. But the fact that we would pull out of the World Health Organization's funding at this point in time, in the midst of a pandemic, being the epicenter of the pandemic, is nothing short of ludicrous for me. And it's just a clear trend by the Trump administration to continue to pull out away from global institutions and toward isolationism. And that's really, that's a troubling thing for me. And the World Health Organization always provides valuable information. And if we had actually listened to them more specifically in the beginning, then we probably would have less of an outbreak at this point in time. There's something else I wanted to say. So some people are just talking about the diversification of the economy. Thanks for your comments, Sean. I appreciate that. Thanks. I'm hoping for supporters too. So thank you, Sean. And we'll get to ways that you can support me moving forward as well. And there's Miss Edie, little knucklehead. This is why we're isolating by guys. This little sweetie pie who's already had respiratory failure and blood disease and immune problems. She looks like a sweet little knucklehead here, but she's very, very, very high risk. So we have been home for 4 weeks. Let's talk a little bit about the global economy though. So I have been a longtime proponent. I'm actually a representative to the United Nations on behalf of the International Association for Community Development. So I've been in a space where I've been advocating at the global level for community participation in all different kinds of decision making, and particularly at our supranational United Nations level. And we need this to inform what's going on. The other role that the United Nations take that's really important is it helps us understand outside of our own national rhetoric what's going on. And that's a big deal because we can get wrapped up on our own stuff quite easily. And having that check, I think actually that's one of the reasons why Trump has been so insistent on defunding and pulling out of everything from the Human Rights Council to the Paris Agreement and now to the World Health Organization. It's crazy to me. The other thing that's really crazy about it, and I will talk about the economy, the global economy at just another moment, but we created these institutions, guys. This came completely out of our design. That's why the UN headquarters is in New York. It came out of the Bretton Woods, which is New Jersey, I believe. And this came from our democratic principles, from our market-based economic principles. The entire global system of the United Nations, and that includes the IMF and the World Bank and the World Health Organization and the WTO. These are all based on principles that we used to believe in. And that's what kills me about it. And the biggest critique, by the way, and this is coming from somebody who has done, my master's is in international public administration and international relations. My PhD is in Asia Pacific studies, and it was a continuation of research on government and evaluation. Is the biggest critique around the world in international development is that the United Nations and all of its subsidies are too Western oriented. They're too controlled by the United States and Western Europe. That is the way that the rest of the world has looked at it. It's so confusing to everybody else that we're pulling out. Like they can't believe it. They can't believe that we have had one of the most prominent places in the world and some of the most powerful organizations that signify essentially the place that we all want to be. Like, guys, don't you want to live in like Star Trek global community land? This first step is the United Nations, right? Where we can play together nice here in our own world. But, you know, we've designed these in the image of the government that we think works best. And frankly, it's worked really well, but the whole rest of the world has always been upset with how much dominance we've had around it. They can't believe that we're ceding this kind of power. You know what I mean? They can't believe it. You know, and so I get very upset by it. Clearly, I'm very passionate about this component of it because, you know, we have built these amazing organizations which are founded on the fundamental principle of economic integration to stop war. You know, that's how they started. So we had a forum, so we weren't going to war with one another over trade disputes, over massive inflation, like in Germany, right? In World War I, World War II, when economies collapse, they lash out outward as well. They find scapegoats and they do bad things. And the United Nations has played a significant role, as well as all the affiliate organizations, and making sure that there is a forum for this, so that there's a path to diplomacy. And the economic component of it is amazingly important. The World Bank and the IMF is going to play a very important role in the years to come in this economic aftermath, helping countries rebuild after this. And we didn't have that prior to the post-World War II area, and it was absolutely, they came out of the aftermath of rebuilding the destruction on the ground in Europe, is that there needed to be funding to help countries that had been completely decimated by the war to rebuild. And there was global collaboration around it, and countries all around the world put money into it. The United States put money into it because we didn't have the ground loss. We didn't have the manufacturing bases destroyed in the same way, right? So why are we dismantling this system? Why are we against it? Is something I'll never understand. And we had been making amazing strides in global economic development in helping people around the world. And so a lot of that is under risk right now. And this is where the second component, and this is where it is my heart piece. I tell my students in global studies, this is my passion piece is global poverty alleviation, because it's really hard to live with the knowledge once you understand that there are people in this world that do not have enough money to eat, right? That they are living below that line. It's really hard to know that and not be activated about it, and not to start to see the systems that are a component of it. So we had made progress through the Millennium Development Goals leading up to 2000, and then with the Sustainable Development Goals afterwards, and helping to formulate outcomes-based poverty alleviation. And we significantly reduced the components. So from 1997 levels, I believe, we had reduced poverty overall by about 45–50%. The problem really, there was still quite a lot of people in poverty, roughly I think 1.7 billion people still living below the global poverty line. And just in case you don't know what that is, it slightly depends on the calculation and whom is calculating it, but it has been over recent years at the $1.25 purchasing power parity per day, which is basically how much $1.25 will buy you of goods. And it's not exactly a conversion of currency, but it's like, here's $1.25 and that's what you get. And so the abject poverty line is people who have less than that $1.25 a day to live. Okay. And that's just, if you think about what $1.25 buys you, you can see like how impoverished people around the world are. So we had made strides. We had reduced it by total amount, something like, almost half a billion, but there was still quite a lot of people in there because of population growth. So the percentage-wise went down a lot, but there was still work to be done. Because of the coronavirus and the economic outcomes from this, we are looking at, by the way, 500 million more people entering into poverty. So, and according to, and this was an Oxfam report that was just recently released, called Dignity Not Destitution. And their estimates would put almost half the world, for about 3 billion people in poverty as a result of the coronavirus. So this is pretty massive. And again, it's that abject poverty, not like United States $13,000 a year poverty, okay, which is its own contextualized poverty. But this is like cannot eat, malnutrition, high child mortality rate poverty, okay? And it's a big concern. And the other reason that it's a concern, so if I can kind of like take my bleeding heart component off, right? Because poverty is connected to, by the way, all the Sustainable Development Goals. And I encourage you, if you haven't checked out my policy pages on the website, I have aligned my policies to the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think it's important for us to think not only locally here in Southwest Florida what needs to be done, and nationally in the United States, but how our work aligns to all of the biggest goals in the world. All of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are components around that are necessary to essentially work towards ultimately reducing the amount of poverty and vulnerability in the world. And it does include economic factors. It does include manufacturing, sustainable cities. It does include investment in philanthropy. It does include health and nutrition and education and women's rights and equality. And it's all of these things play into poverty. But back to why this matters, okay? Because it's very easy to sit in the United States and be like, look, things are horrible here for us. Sorry, it's so bad for them, but we really got to think about it here. if we are really walking into an economic contraction year of 3%, okay, so that's huge, by the way, okay, and we're looking at a massive uptick in the people who move into abject poverty. Our world is significantly more destabilized. So not only does all this heartwarming stuff about helping people affect people who care, okay, it affects our global security. It affects our national security, okay? So the more people that you have in poverty, the more likely you have the opportunity for terrorist groups to take hold, for various insurgent groups to take hold in various countries around the world. You're going to have an increased fighting among scarce resources, and you're going to see that spill out outside of those countries. You're going to see conflict spin up, and you're going to see ramifications potentially even coming to our shores. So it's a dangerous situation overall. These are broad systemic issues, and we really need to be cognizant of what happens when a bunch of people go into poverty. Okay, so it's not just like, oh, sorry about the poor people, but like, hey, those poor people, because they're not being taken care of, they've been, disenfranchised from the system, they are more likely to engage with actors who seek to destabilize the global system. So that's why we need to care. Eddie, I see that there's another question. Can you tell me what that is?
Yes. So someone's asking, looking out 4 to 6 years, what are your goals and strategies for reimagining and sustaining Southwest Florida's economy?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. So locally, I think that we, I would serve in my role as a congressional representative to help to make sure that we are getting the right kinds of supports to realign our economy and to diversify our economy. The other thing that we have that's a major issue in Southwest Florida, aside from it being totally in one bucket of tourism, but we have ostensibly a donut economy. We have a whole lot of people on the top, like retirees and things like that, people that had or are continuing to make high incomes. We have a whole lot of people at the bottom. We're missing the middle part. So this is where actually our overall productivity is really in trouble. And the reason that we're missing that component, and this is like mid-career, it's people like me, frankly. There's not a lot of people like me in this mid part. They're mid-career professionals, people with families, manager, general managers, high, mid-level administrative folks. The reason we don't have that many is because they're priced out of the housing market here. The schools are not that good. So if you make the choice of moving in here and you cannot essentially afford private school, or you cannot afford a $300,000 house, you're not moving here to fill those gaps in the economy, okay? So what we would need to do is we need to make sure that we have a robust understanding of all the components of our workforce, and that is education, K-12 education, housing, and that there are supports and access for people to engage in the development of robust schools and affordable housing. So it would be working to make sure that those funds are released and supporting those organizations from the federal government down to the state, and through probably an increase in community development block grants, as well as a reform of what is required to get some of those, because currently there's a lot of requirements that keep those dollars, and this is like the state administration around it, but keep those dollars in the pockets of big developers. And that's never going to help us diversify our economy. So that's one component of it. I think immediately, and this may be something going into the next congressional year that I would be voting on. I would be making sure that we have the additional continuation of things like the basic income supports, and that there's a universal, or not universal, but the unemployment supports are there, that we are also having additional accountability of the states to make sure they are in compliance with the federal regulations related to the CARES Act. The next component then is going to be moving from this immediate cash infusing to families to into fiscal policy stimulus. And what I mean by that is we're going to need to start to use government funding to give people jobs again, because we're going to have this massive unemployment rate, similar to the way, if you think about the after the Obama stimulus plan after in 2009, 2010, the big component around that was infrastructure projects, right? And this is a major way that the government can really revive economies, is by providing funding for those major infrastructure projects. We know that we need it anyway because we've already been disinvesting in those public goods for a long time, but we really need to seriously consider how we are going to do that. So we would be ramping up funding to fix our roads and our bridges all across the country, as well as to fortify our waterways and to strengthen the environmental protections around them. These are all projects that would be able to hire folks in and keep them employed as we start rebuilding other private sector components of our economy. I would make sure that we would be having the funding necessary to keep small businesses working the way that we are, but actually make sure that it works, and hold the private companies and the private banks accountable that have gotten these funds. So they cannot get them and then not distribute them to people, and we're at a real risk of that. The other component that I'm looking at that has been a very serious consideration for me is essentially what the post-corona world is going to look like, what the post-corona economy is going to need. We were already on the precipice of some pretty significant changes in our economy around automation and around, even if you want to call, manufacturing outsource and things like that. But a lot of it had to do with technology and digital transformation. The coronavirus has accelerated that. So we really need some investments in helping people to transition into new roles. And that's going to be very emergent. So we have to be able to provide funding around that is not going to be so contingent on it. Some of the ways that this has worked inappropriately in the past is when we said, okay, we're going to fund, digital education or whatever, but the government wasn't very good at defining that, and so it didn't really happen the way that it needed to. You can look at, we would be learning from the failures of NAFTA, by the way. And not just NAFTA as the plan, but the fallout of NAFTA, where they did put some of these training and enrollment components in it afterwards, but it wasn't really very well implemented. And this is where we had a lot of people kind of fall out of what had been the manufacturing economy and become disaffected folks. So we really need to think about that. So I would be working towards making sure that there's funding for, the education and training components to help transition unemployed people into growing sectors of our economy and future and innovative sectors of our economy. And that's what I would look to include in the next Congress, the next bill. So, keep in mind, I get 2 years to get this done. But what I would be working on in the long run to help make sure our economy works is working on that public good component, making sure that we are continuously investing in things that are necessary for people, and that we're using evidence-based practice and accountability measures to track those dollars. I have a history as an evaluator, so it's very important to me to know where the money is going and to know that it's being spent well. But I would be working with that with some oversight bodies that have recently been created to ensure that there's accountability on that, and that there is not the opportunity for graft and corruption through these stimulus packages that there is because of Donald Trump and his cronies. So I hope that gives you some ideas of the goals and outcomes that I would be working toward as your congressional representative. Eddie, are there other questions?
There's a comment. Basically, Sean is saying, keep up the good work, continue to shed light on these issues, keep using your voice. Talking about how NATO's critical, and how Trump has taken steps back on the international stage. So keep doing good work and keep it up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I will. I cannot not talk about these things. I know stuff. And I think that at least I can tell you that from the bottom of my heart as somebody who's running for this seat. Not only am I committed to our community and helping ordinary people, ordinary families like mine get through tough times, particularly economically, but I know a lot and have researched and published and studied and lectured on these very issues. And so I'm not just bought off by a party. I'm not bought off by a corporate PAC or a political super PAC. looking at you, drain the swamp, right? I am just somebody who cares so much about this and wants to use my technical expertise in policy design, in evaluation, and use that to make good choices for us at the policy level and still be coming back and having the desire to connect back with our community. I have yet to see either of those things from any of the candidates on both sides of the aisle in Florida 19, and that is simply the truth. There is nobody else out there that is running for this seat that doesn't have their own political and personal and financial gains in mind. There is nobody else that has the community credentials that I do in terms of long-term commitment and support to organizations and helping people in Southwest Florida. There's nobody else that has the publishing track record that I have on good governance in this country and around the world. And so if you really think that that stuff matters, if you think that knowing how our government should work, can work, and could work, right, is valuable, then I think that I'm the candidate for you. If you want a real person that knows some stuff, that's ready to go up and fight for you in Washington, D.C., I think you should vote for me. And speaking of that, our primary is August 18th. I am registered, I'm a Democrat, so I hope that you are registered. There's still time for you to register as a Democrat and vote for me in the August 18th primary. And if you'd like some more information about me, this is another way to get to my website at cindy4swfl.com. Again, I'm at SWFL Mom 2020 on Twitter, on Facebook, and Instagram. I would love to have you there and have you be a part of the conversation there. I am also a member of the No Dem Left Behind Coalition. We have some very amazing events coming up with them. Tomorrow, we have an evening town hall with Alyssa Milano, and we have some other big name supporters coming to help our coalition in the upcoming week. So definitely keep an eye out on that. And we're going to keep the conversation going. We're going to keep supporting Democrats in red districts because it matters, and it matters to you. And you can know that I am always here fighting for you. And if you have the ability to support my campaign, I absolutely need that as a grassroots candidate. I am on Act Blue. You can also find information about how to donate to me on my campaign page. There's a little donate button right at the top. Every single dollar matters to a candidate, a grassroots candidate like me. Do not have tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of what some of my opponents have in their own bank accounts that they're putting into their campaign account. I simply do not have that. I am running very hand to mouth, and I am a mom who is fighting for my kids and yours. So thanks for joining me here today, and really looking forward to continuing our conversation and being your representative to the U.S. House of Representatives for Florida Congressional District 19. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Have a great day.